Hi, this is Nitin Raizada from Indegene. I'm a Vice President of Commercial Digital Transformation here at Indegene, responsible for areas like patient services, digital transformation, and data and analytics. Today, I'll be joined on a panel, a very exciting conversation about how's transformation and innovation driving patient experience in a personalized manner, accelerating time to therapy, and what are the new frontiers that pharma is chasing today, creating unified, personalized patient experiences, and the role of healthcare in this transformation? So I'll be joined by three of my panelists. I'll introduce them shortly. Thank you. So I have with me today Anurag Thakur, who's the head of digital operations at Bayer. I have Jen from Novo Nordisk, who's the Senior Director, Consumer Diabetes Marketing. And I have Kerry Nelson, who's the Chief Medical Officer at Amgen. So we wanted to bring in a collective perspective on this extremely interesting topic, along with pharma as well as the healthcare side, so that we can bring in that contrast or similarities and look at the different expectations, challenges that each of the sectors are facing. Um, just to give you a quick preamble to the topic, the reason why we thought about this topic today's day and age in 2022, we see huge amount of digital transformation happening across pharma. Patient experience has been an old topic, but there's a lot of investment, a lot of a lot of focus on patient marketing, on patient support services, on adherence services, platforms, digital health tools that have been invested by pharma, and they're out there. But the patient experience still remains broken. It is still not unified, and we see a lot of effort in this direction. We see a um, lot of conversation around this area. So we thought that we will bring in experts who've seen this particular area up and close, and we will have a conversation around it. I'll go around the table, ask everyone to introduce themselves, and talk about what do you think about patient experience in your own right. Again, this is your personal experience, your personal views. You're not representing your companies here, so I just want to make sure that I say that these are your own experiences and your own thinking about the topic, not your company's position. But we would love to hear, based on your extensive experience in this area, some of the questions that we have today. And I look forward to an exciting conversation. So, Jen, why don't we start with you? Please introduce yourself and talk about what do you think when you think about patient experience.
No, thank you so much for having me here. Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Harrington, and I've been in the industry, God, probably 20 some years. You lose count as you get older. But I've been about inpatient marketing for over a decade now. Once I moved into the patient marketing role, I just fell in love, mostly because it's why we're all here to help improve patient outcomes. And we all do it in slightly different ways based on our role. So when I hear patient experience as a marketer, I think about the patient journey and the emotions that layer into that journey. Whether you're not diagnosed yet and learning and starting to experience symptoms through diagnosis and then also treatment, how can we as marketers help improve that experience from an emotional standpoint? So, the win-win, you see success, it breeds success, but then also from a functional standpoint, while we're talking about digital innovation, how can we layer that into that emotional experience to ultimately make it easier for patients to achieve success on whatever treatment they're on?
Thank you, Jen. Anurag?
Thanks, Nitin. Thanks for the and thanks to really happy to be a part of this awesome panel for this exciting. So, as Nitin mentioned, I'm Anurag Thakur. I'm part of the Bayer U.S. Pharma organization, and I lead the digital operations. The U.S. content studio, which is literally digital content leading the marketing automation arm for the U.S. Pharma organization. So the topic it's interesting and it's exciting. And as you look at patient experiences, you look at from a lens of digital, think of a few things that come to mind, right? The first thing is content, making sure that we have in plethora, right? So, because of the ways the pharma organizations have gone to market, it's not always easy enough to create times. Rather, content is reused and it may not be fit for purpose. So that's one key thing. In the experience, you want to make sure that you have the right pieces of content to hit the right tone at the right time. Channels, making sure that we're hitting the right channels. There are companies I've seen and heard of where, interactions, the use cases that we're talking about don't hit the right, the right tone from the right channel. Third is the aspect of data. Kind of in my naive way of looking, like one huge giant Excel spreadsheet that basically has hundreds and thousands for a consumer/patient. And how do you basically collect the data, synchronize it, organize it, identify what you need to know about them, and how do you treat with it, how do you handle that from a better treatment? And encompassing all of this is really a patient experience, right? Making sure that when they're interacting on a basis of a systematic, similar. So from the point of what Jen mentioned, right? You're either pre-diagnosed, you're you're in the adherent state. The experiences need to be consistent. They should be. It should feel that are interacting with one brand or one product, as opposed to different who are providing services for that product, right? So, in line with the patient journey, in line with what we're talking about, I think the unification and the synergy is super critical.
I'm glad that you say that. At least the need is felt, and that's the entire reason why we think the unification of patient experience and all the things that you mentioned, both of you, is very, very critical. I'll move to Carrie, ask her perspective from a very different side as what she thinks about patient experience in her own realm.
Sure. So great to be with you all. And just for my own introduction, I am Carrie Nelson. I'm a family physician by training. And my current role is as Chief Medical Officer for Amwell, a digital company focused on telemedicine and bringing it to care and really transforming the care model with digital solutions. I have spent the lion's share of my career, over 20 years, focused on improving healthcare from the inside. So very much embedded in healthcare systems. I have been in charge of quality, safety, and population health for many years in that role. So if I have two hats, if I to think about this in terms of how I'd qualify patient experience. So, one of the things that's most important, I think you alluded to it on Anurag, is that ultimately getting to better health outcomes is the potential of a strong patient experience. And so if we have a patient who is feeling that they're listened to, that they're understanding their treatment plan, and they know how to implement it in their lives, we can get a better patient experience and a better patient outcome. So that's really, and I will say that's challenging many times within the healthcare system. We sometimes think about it as really just, displaying empathy, making sure we're being courteous and kind, and those are necessary preconditions, but really meaningfully listening and customizing a treatment plan to a patient's particular circumstances is ultimately what we want to get to with patient experience. On the side of the digital world that I live in now, so much of this relates to ease of use, and much of what both of you talked about as from your perspectives on pharma, and making sure it's relevant, that the information is digestible and usable in the context of the day-to-day experience of a patient with a given condition. So these things, I think, are really strong foundations to developing a strong collaborative treatment plan for people that are on a healthcare journey.
Thank you so much. And this has been an interesting point of debate across my career. I've seen pharma on one side, healthcare on the other. They've continued to invest more and more in patient experience, and the shift has been to digital of late, especially after COVID. And at this time, I think while both entities, even the payers, they are trying to create a different way in which they are building patient experiences. I think the time has come when we start looking at, are there connecting points? Are there points that one can leverage from the other? So towards that, we have a few questions today, and I'll get into some of the questions that we'll inform the audience more about how you're thinking about different aspects of patient experience. Let me ask the first question to Anurag and Jen. When it comes to patient experience, how does pharma compare with the rest of healthcare? Right, there is a wave of patient experience platform tools, services that everybody is trying to throw at it. What, in your opinion, Anurag, let's start with you. Uh, how does pharma compare with the rest of the healthcare?
Yeah, great question, Nitin. And I think if we kind of deeper into the experience aspect, I think the needs or the solves, if I may, that the pharma companies are trying to apply or healthcare systems are trying to apply are slightly different, right? Both of them have the patient at the center, but to say, all right, how do I educate? How do I make them aware? How do I provide information in digestible format? How do I provide tools and services that enable them to better the treatment plan, the product itself, and enable better. They're more intelligent and more educated about the product, right? So that's really their, the systems on the other hand are really this point of care, right? They're focusing on how do I address experience. There's a tangent, right? The product is a tangent, right? The treatment plan is a tangent to what is slightly and substantially different, I would say. And so I think this was opposite, but in my lens, right, I look at it, I think the two of them are trying to do different things and in their own journey to evolution and optimization.
Mhm. Jen, how would you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so I think pharma is, if you're looking at bell curve, I think everybody's kind of in the middle of that bell curve. I agree that we all have the same objectives, right? And it's just the approach that's slightly different based on obviously where you're sitting and what your strategic goals are. But everybody is, with the regulations in place, I think doing a somewhat really nice job of trying to enhance that patient experience. So within pharma, I always joke around with my colleagues, innovation is a big broad term, especially when you're talking about digital innovation, but these small little steps, even like a patient preference center to help improve a patient's journey with how you're communicating to them, is a huge leap within pharma. It's amazing. I work on the marketing side. I work very closely with my operations colleagues and patient, services colleagues. And my head kind of spins when I see what they're trying to accomplish from both an IT and a privacy standpoint. So I kind of give us a little bit of leeway when you're looking at how are we doing, because I think we're all doing a really nice job based on all the hurdles that we face and with the ultimate goal of trying to help that patient. I think utopia would be one day where pharma can work digitally, right, and connect into with all the pharmacy systems, with the healthcare systems, because we have a broken experience right now. For instance, I suffer from chronic migraine, and my healthcare is communicating to me, my doctor is communicating to me, and then the company, because of course I'm a marketer, I joined their support system or support program, they're communicating with me, and it's all great communications, but it's not aligned onto what my journey is. It's all very siloed. So moving forward, I know it's a dream, but it would be amazing if the platforms could connect and really ultimately help that patient with one experience versus kind of these segmented ones.
No, brilliant point of view, Jen. And as you know, all of us are people and patients. We have a lot of
Mhm.
domain experience in this, right? All of us face these barriers, these challenges on a daily basis. And I agree with you. The regulatory environment, the conditions that are applicable to pharma, definitely limits us. But having said that, I think there is a question about why do we as pharma need to focus more on patient experience strategies? Where is the incentive? Why should we be doing this in this era today in 2022 and going forward? Let me
Yeah,
start with you then, and then we'll ask the same question to Anurag as well.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, we're all in our jobs to help patients achieve better outcomes. Yeah, PRB may not, the legal system, or PRB, sorry, review team may not approve that, obviously, but ultimately, I think if you're working within healthcare, wherever you sit, you have a passion for helping people live a better quality of life and live longer. And why do we want to have a patient strategy? Well, if you're patient focused and patient centricity is at the center of what you do, ultimately everything that builds around it from the highest level at CEO down is going to impact that patient's life. So I know in our mission statement, I'm sure many pharma companies, almost all of them, have patient centered right there. Everything we talk about is the patient. And if you continue to do that, your strategies down to your positioning of your products, to your tactics, will embrace that strategy and really do right by the patient to help them. Whether you're trying to acquire them, we do a lot of DTC advertising, and that's to get people to be empowered, right? To go and research their disease, see if they're on the right treatment, and talk to their HCP about what they can do about it, down to the adherence level. We're obviously for profit. So if a patient's doing better and staying on product longer, that provides profits. But a lot of those profits for companies go back into research, right? So to me, by grounding ourselves in this, it's just a win-win for every stakeholder.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Anurag, your point?
Excellent points, right? So I think, to the examples you provided, just to kind of add a couple of points that I think it's about creating that advocacy and that loyalty, right? From a marathon, not a sprint. It's not like instant gratification that we need to get this person or this patient on the product, whatever it is. It's a journey. So how do you create those amazing experiences? We as individuals, so many different systems and platforms, you don't always, if you don't always go in and buy something, you go in, you have the experience, you come out. But then the experience stays with organizations look to create those outstanding experiences. Then for the next interaction or the next interaction, or even just word of mouth and creating that. So when all else is equal, this becomes a standout factor where reputation starts to build based on not just the products and services you deliver, but also the deliver.
Mm-hmm. So all these strategies, of course, we see in application and movement today, the companies trying to do a variety of things. But I think what becomes very important is how do you measure? How do you measure patient experience? How do you drive ROI? I think a lot of investments, a lot of program planning is contingent on that. Any point of view around that, Anurag?
And the key thing is identifying the key moments, right? The moments in the journey, those, and saying, hey, these are the influencing moments, these are the critical moments. And then for those identifying opportunities, very quick, 10 seconds, like thumbs up, thumbs down, NPS score, right? Where you can start to create a baseline for, and that baseline starts to become your bedrock of the models. And then you basically, that helps you drive the optimization aspect of things. You see that, hey, as a result of us doing this, the direction or the other direction, you can get a sense of what's going on. And that will help to become, of course, as Jane mentioned, right, the ROI is still critical. And a plethora of data, and there's enough volume across the different engagements. You can create, the ROI becomes like a lagging indicator, and these becomes leading indicators. But the whole aspect, focusing all the time on the ROI, but kind of building on the building, little moments, and these once you build on those moments, then eventually, if you do come out right.
Nice. I mean, I do understand. I think that's how it is being driven today, and the focus on creating those moments with the patient, creating that interaction, and hopefully generating that data that will inform the future strategy is something so important. I'll shift gears now, and I'll ask Carrie. Previously the patient journey started after you meet the doctor. The doctor advises you. You have an issue. Today, patients are coming very well informed, and to many parts, the work that Anurag and Jen are doing on their side, where the patient has access to a lot of information on Google. He walks into the doctor's experience in the doctor's office and has a very different expectation. So, what can we do as an industry, as pharma today, to make sure that the patient is getting the right information and not a lot of information. That's the case today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the challenge, right? And you always have that disclaimer on the direct to consumer that the FDA requires you to put on the ads, which is a lot of information, and it's hard to absorb it all. As you mentioned, patients oftentimes will do a Google search, or they come in with having seen those direct to consumer ads, and all too often when they come and bring that to the physician will discount it and say, they discredit the information, and there's a little bit of a tension there. And it reminds me of the coffee cup that someone gave me, which says, "Do not mistake your Google search for my medical degree." And it's just such an example of arrogance that exists in the medical profession that is eroding our patient experience for sure. And so how do we better partner with patients in a way that helps them understand where they can find credible information, and put things into more plain language? And I think that's something that pharma actually does really well, because you have to. You can't get results out of all the expensive ad campaigns that you're putting out there if it's not understandable for people. Somehow we've been able to get away with that in healthcare, unfortunately, for too long, and it's creating inequities, it's creating disparities, and it's eroding that patient experience. And so how do we go about changing that? I think first off, we need, for one, you understand how pressured the physician and the hospital environments are, and so I think that's certainly a factor in the erosion of our ability to communicate clearly and provide information to people in an understandable manner. We also know that burnout is a particular problem in healthcare spheres, and that burnout, empathy is one of the first things to go. And so, to the degree that we can provide tools that support the physician-patient relationship, that everyone can agree is good information. Not everyone, but I'm meaning, the medical community, the respected medical community, and the pharma community and others. How do we make sure that those tools are available in a way that supports the patient journey and relieves the pressure on the moment of doctor-patient interactions in a way that sometimes the message doesn't get delivered adequately. I think the fact that you have these digital assets is huge, and yet curating them for a full patient population can be very challenging. So we've got, if you're a family doctor like myself, you have multiple disease states where patients could have access to these various tools for their medication adherence and management of their lifestyle. It's less problematic for a specialty physician that might have a lot of MS patients, or one particular disease that's predominating their practice. They can make better use of these things. So taking those things into consideration as you're trying to be successful in rolling out some of these digital tools, which are very much needed, I think is going to be very important.
That's an awesome point. I think that's a great perspective coming from a real practitioner. I think pharma should definitely look into that. I'll switch gears in the interest of time. I think one of the best way to optimize any experience is to ask the user, right? How do they conceive it? What is their experience through that entire process that they are going through? So when it comes to the patient, Jen, let me ask you this question: what processes, tools should you be putting in to ensure that the voices of the patient themselves is being heard and being implemented in things that you're doing? How do
Yeah,
you go
no,
about it?
it's the foundation of everything we do. So market research is at the basis of anything you see go into market. And obviously, market research does cost money. So budget kind of dictates to the level that we do it. So you have your traditional qualitative or quantitative research methods. And those are obviously employed, especially when you're doing your positioning, your campaign building, to ensure that the spend you're about to put behind it's going to resonate with the ultimate user, the patient. But we get creative too when we need to get feedback. When you're looking at the DTC advertising, if someone's going to say, hey, for a type 2 diabetes patient, let's put spelunking as a scenario. Well, probably not going to be as relatable, right? Pretty obvious there. But we even do research on the scenarios to make sure they're aspirational, but also feasible for a majority of the people that we're trying to communicate with. A lot of organizations, and my company included, have ERGs. So we'll even go when we're creating content or just have a question, we'll reach out to the ERG and get the employee feedback of people living with the disease state to ensure that we're not, making a misstep. And finally, I have some relatives and also some friends who are living with type 2 diabetes. I'll even bounce some stuff off of them when I'm just thinking through stuff. And as we mentioned, Google, everybody's Googling too. I think another trend that is going on that pharma, for regulation reasons, cannot really tap into are these communities within social networks. The good and bad of it, I made the mistake of joining the migraine one, and now I'm experiencing side effects I never had because people are talking about them. So I'm very suggestible, um, but those communities exist, and as pharma, we can't tap into them, right? Even as a marketer, I can't even go on to the brand ones that I'm promoting because I have to report side effects every other minute. But I do think it's another place where people are, especially doing market research, not necessarily the pharma, but this market research is vastly important to everything we do.
You're absolutely right. There's a plethora of data today. There's a plethora of avenues through which you can glean information. I think we need to walk that tightrope, right? What regulatory allows us to do, what information is meaningful, and how fast in a meaningful way we can use it and to inform our programs. Switching gears, interest of time, digital transformation, Anurag, something that you and I have talked about many times in the past as well, is key to driving patient experience, right? There's the new thing from hundreds of HCPs to millions of patients, probably the only way in which you can touch and you can provide those services is digital. Where do you see the industry going towards adopting digital transformation to support customer experience? What are the challenges, most importantly, that you face in this area?
Great question, Nitin. I think to the heart of everything that all of us within the pharma kind of seeing in some way, shape, or form is digital transformation. And historically, the primarily been focused on a certain way in terms of going to the AT, being the field focused, sales focused, and the organizations in terms of how they're structured. And there's a reason for that, and that's totally fair. The pandemic has either initiated or jumping into the whole digital transformation bandwagon. Now, when we talk about digital transformation, supplemental or an add-on to your tool set, it's not like saying, hey, I have this 7 to do business, and here's an 8th, 9th, and 10th way. Really, it comes to the organization approaches going to market. Digital, it needs to be as opposed to like an add-on, right? So, and that could potentially mean an upskilling of, and when I mean the function, I don't mean the chosen few functions that are relevant. It's really across the organization. It takes a town, a village, a city, or even a state to really do this, because people need to understand that digital transformation is not a short term or there are opportunities where you may have to unlearn and relearn some of the ways of what you define how it should be done. Now that we have these tools, now we have these capabilities, how do you optimize the approach in terms of engagement, and how do you pay attention to the things that we've just talked about in this thing, the little things that matter, the little moments, and bring them to life. So journey, and I think it's a very fascinating time to be in the industry, because the challenges in which shape or form, but how do you move forward is that will win will really be the ones that are from the inside out looking at digital transformation as an ancillary function.
Yep. No, I agree, and I think then we should ask Kerry. Pharma is investing in a lot of these digital platforms today. Do you see a way in which healthcare can actually leverage these investments and be a participant? What's your point of view around that?
Yeah, I would say for one, yes, I do believe that there's a place for them, and the challenge is in the execution, right? In the context of the busy environment of healthcare. Um, Healthcare systems are struggling with making the needed investments in these kind of things themselves. And as healthcare organizations get more and more into value-based care, it becomes more important that they make these investments. If pharma can come to the table with something that would spare the healthcare system from making that investment, and then it also can operationalize it in the context of the healthcare workflow, there's a lot that could be achieved through the use of these digital tools. And I think I've talked to some of the complexities of that. I think some of the the highest cost drugs are probably those that you could work with a select group of physicians and healthcare providers that are dealing with a particularly specific kind of patient population to make it more executable in a workflow fashion than potentially a primary care kind of model.
Mhm.
The other thing I'll
So,
just add is that pharmacists within healthcare systems are taking on bigger and bigger roles, and working directly with those pharmacists, I think, can also help. Get them. They can focus in an area like this to build it into the workflow.
no, I think that's a very interesting point. Definitely, I think the role of pharmacists, I see in many, many programs today that pharma is launching is an integral, role that we are trying to address as well. So just another question around the same point, Carrie, that, healthcare and pharma both are trying towards driving better health outcomes for the patient, right? Through Unified, do you see a possibility of unification of patient education at least? I mean, that's something that we talked about. It affects the doctor's experience with the patient in the first few interactions. Pharma is obviously trying to spend a lot. Do you think there is a possibility of unifying patient education between pharma and healthcare?
I do think it's definitely possible. I think it relates somewhat to what Jen was saying early on in the conversation about bringing that whole ecosystem together in a way that the parts talk to one another. I think with a platform that allows you to integrate different apps and patient digital solutions, and then be able to curate them appropriately for the patient, that is certainly doable. And really important to try and work towards.
Mhm. So, in the interest of time, we are well over our 30 minutes. We have a few audience question also, but I still want to ask one more question. I think uh, we're talking about patient, right? But the patient access is through the HCP. Uh, can patient experience be improved without taking HCP into account, right? We many a times we see that all the programs that pharma is launching, HCP is an actor, but is not integral to that entire program. What do you think driving, how do we engage with HCPs in driving the cohesive customer experience? Anurag, Jen, I would like to know your response to that.
Yeah, again, excellent. In the from where I've my experience and my analysis, right? The pharma companies have created patient journeys, right? So they've kind of mapped out patient journey. Again, key moments of influence that have to go through, and then in some of those cases, and they're all kind of both running in parallel. I think the ideal state for us to would be to really and figure out at what point in time the patient journeys are going to be interactive journeys, and what do the patients need to know, and what information can we provide the How do we make sure that the HCPs are armed not just with the fact that hey, here's the drug, here's the disease, here's what the side effects are, but also here's also the tools the pharma organization is able to provide to these patients. Should they be considered to be on? They can definitely get a full 360 view of that of the product and be most informed before providing or kind of setting up a prescription for these.
Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, no, 100% agree with everything that was just stated. I mean, we are a patient-centric industry, and pharma relies on the HCP. We would be nowhere, obviously. It doesn't matter. I could spend $1 billion talking about a product, but if HCP is not aligned to that product and does not want to write that product, it means nothing. So the HCP experience and their journey is essential to everything a patient marketer does. And internally, we go as far as building positioning together. So from a marketing standpoint, we're looking at building stuff on parallel paths to make sure they're aligned. So we're speaking very similarly in very different language, obviously, but very, very similar. So when a patient does come in and let's say, hey, Dr. Carey, something about the product, it clicks what product it is. And there's an understanding of how to take the product, what's in, the side effects of the product. The whole experience is aligned. From a non-personal standpoint, once again, this is, we're getting baby steps to it, but the utopia is, you have a big DTC marketing plan. What's that non-personal plan look like? What are the messagings? Once again, how are you communicating? And if you picture like a big map of touch points, ultimately you want to make sure the journey throughout your year, let's say, if we're doing just budgeting, everything's aligned. So it's holistically working for both the patient and the HCP. So you cannot, within our industry, go siloed whatsoever.
No, that's great to hear. And HCP is definitely integral to all these programs and the success of these programs, most importantly.
Mm-hmm.
I think we will stop with the questions that I had, because there are questions coming from the audiences and we have about 10 minutes left. So one of the questions that we are getting is, I think it's a very interesting question. Today, PSS, patient support and services, has emerged as one of the largest areas that pharma is spending on. The experience is of a very different type, right? But it is a massive experience that the patient has to go through as they start getting onto the therapy. Now, patient marketing, on the other side, is slightly before that. You are still trying to engage with the patient. These two are relatively different, right? What is the role of the patient marketing in this new construct as PSS is gaining more and more ground? Anurag, you would like to comment on that?
Great question, right? I think, again, when my first thing that I'd mentioned to you was the seamlessness. I think instead of looking at it from what's the role of patient marketing versus what's the role of PSS, from a patient perspective, how are they being interacted with, right? What does the messaging look like, right? The whole way from acquisition to adherence, right? Benefit verification and for dose, and then moving on. So the entire stretch of those things have to be consistent. And if you're basically creating a building block to a great patient experience. So his perspective, and also more really from a patient's perspective, as opposed to looking at from a function perspective, making some headway into the right direction.
Wonderful. So I'm seeing some very, very interesting questions here on the chat. Jen, there is a question about, you are taking in patient-centric approaches. That's the mantra for pharma companies. But how do you ensure that, especially in an area like diabetes, which afflicts millions, billions of people actually,
Mm-hmm.
illiterate patients who do not really have a voice, how do you incorporate their feedback, their expectations, their lack of understanding about the product, about the disease itself?
Yeah, so health and health literacy and health numeracy are areas that I'm very passionate about, and I've had the support of my organization to help drive better resources for patient understanding. So recently, pre-pandemic, right before we were working on a product launch, and I was able to partner with my regulatory colleagues and actually take the medication guide and work with a health literacy market research agency and put that out there and say, does this make sense? And how can we evolve it so there is better understanding? It's very difficult to do, obviously, with FDA and the regulations. Wins are, a word, urine to pee. That's a huge win in terms of having understanding. That's a simplistic, I guess, explanation, but we have done health literacy research on the medication guide and have helped influence it as far as we're allowed to in a regulated environment, but also on packaging and dosing instructions for that product. We went back and we did more health literacy research. And it was awesome. It was great that we have organizational support. It obviously takes more time and money, but it should be at the center of what you're doing, obviously, and to help people just understand like I said, if you're driving people to a product and they don't understand how to take it or what it's going to do for them, then that's not going to lead to adherence, which means it's a lose for everybody. Patients won't have the outcomes. Industry's not keeping people on product. It's a very good question, and an area I do think pharma as an industry needs to continue to push on.
No, I think I cannot agree more with you. I think it's a very, very large need. And as you start looking at populations in Latam, Asia, Africa, this is one of the biggest challenge. People just don't know. And how do you inform somebody who doesn't even know? I think I definitely see a big role for pharma to play in this particular area. Another very interesting question, Carrie, I myself wanted to know this from you. So as a patient leader, if you have to partner with pharmaceutical industry and if you were to choose, which would be your top priority to focus on? What would you ask pharma to do in collaboration with you?
Yeah, I love the question. I'll try to stick to one thing. I have a longer list, but one of the things that I'm struck by is that when we look at producing value, so I've spent a lot of my career focused on value and improving quality at a reduced cost. And one of the first things that we'll do in that scenario is work with physicians to encourage generic prescribing. And you can get a lot of short-term impact on the financials with that. What we don't know is whether or not some of these more expensive drugs have better long-term outcomes. And we're finding that in some scenarios, and in particular, the anticoagulants for, AFib, and, we're moving more away from warfarin onto the newer drugs, which, are certainly a lot easier to use, less less titration, a lot safer from that perspective. What else can we be looking at that would say, some of these other more high-cost drugs, as an example for diabetes, do they have better long-term outcomes? Is the long-term view that, is it possible that those long-term outcomes would produce more value than what we might see in the short term by putting people on a generic drug? We don't have enough information there to be able to drive behavior in a way that actually gets us to the long-term value. All we know is what the short-term value is on the cost for many conditions and medications.
Excellent point. And I see a lot of work now, real-world evidence, data-backed conversations. Pharma
Yes,
is investing a lot. We are participating in such programs. And I think that
a
will
lot to be
probably
said
address
there.
this need, yes, as we go forward. So another question that has come in, and Jen and Anurag, you may want to respond to this. How pharma marketeers truly adopt a patient-centric brand planning, right? So the brand planning has been an age-old function, but now as you are creating more and more investment in patient programs and patient engagement, how do you think that process is changing? Jen, maybe we start with you.
Sure. I mean, it's a joint collaboration between obviously your HCP team and your patient team and all the other key stakeholders. And everything, once again, is always grounded in the patient. So as long as we have strategic houses, as long as your house is grounded in what is best for the patient while taking a look at all the other key stakeholders that you need to address, that's a step into the right direction to ensure consistency on bringing that experience to life. Sometimes we get very siloed and we forget about the patient, and somebody, including myself or my team, will pop their head up, be like, wait, this is a great idea, but is it truly what's best for the patient? And there are trade-offs because HCPs are obviously very important. You have corporate strategies and everything that factors down, but ultimately it's just embedded in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Anurag?
Yeah. Again, Jen kind of touched on some awesome points, right? I think the aspect of within the HCP go-to-market approach, right? Defining, say, efficacy. Here's all the messaging on why this product is really this therapeutic area. But also add on to that here is the aspect of some patient value that will be generated, right? So you add on to that on the HCP side, and on the patient side, you mentioned, right? Bring in the HCP components in this from the journey perspective. We bring the two parallels possible. Again, with large teams and large organizations, it becomes a challenge. But I think as you kind of mind, you are patient centric when you're creating the HCP plan as well as the consumer or the patient plan drives all the synergies.
Uh-huh. Yep. So thank you. Thank you for your perspectives today. 44 minutes have passed and I didn't realize that we've been talking for this long. This is such an awesome uh, topic that, you can continue to discuss forever. But I would like to really thank you for your perspective today. I think we discussed a lot of very important areas that are instrumental in driving patient experience as we go forward. So thanks again for your time and I look forward to staying engaged with you. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Great to be with you all.
Thank you so much.